Good morning and Happy New Year. Been since last year since I've talked to you. And this is snippet number 18. What I'm going to do, I'm going to give 4 Monday mornings without a skip. We're going to talk about God's timeline and prophecy. Some of you have been asking about it. So I want to move along pretty quickly on this, and so that there won't be much hesitation. I'll follow my notes pretty closely because I don't want to leave anything out. When I was 12 years old, I woke up, looked outside the window, and the sun was shining. Beautiful day, August 1945, and I thought, wonder how many days the sun will shine from now on. I was wondering, where's the world going? Why am I alive? Maybe it'd been better I hadn't been born. For the United States had just dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima, Japan, with devastating effects. 3 years later, in 1948, I was in junior high school, 15 years of age, and Israel became a nation, and there was quite concern whether the world was going to end at that time. Of course, it hasn't. I am now 88 years old, and this month, and I don't know how much longer I'll be here, but I'm much older than I was then. So, what kind of a thought do I have in life? Well, I kind of followed Billy Graham's thought was, plan your entire life as if you're going to live it out to the full, but yet be prepared, spiritually speaking, as if it's your last day on earth. So at about 18 years of age, which was 70 years ago, I decided I was going to try to follow God's timeline and see where it led in the scriptures and what it said. Heard a song, I think the title of it was Stop the World, I Want to Get Off. And we sometimes wonder what in the world is going on. We can either look at the world as, okay, in depression, despair, or fear, or we can look at it with hope and with anticipation and what God has in mind. So I've got good news for you. God is still in control, and I choose to have confidence in Him and His plan and what He's doing and what He's accomplishing. It's been said that things in this world are falling apart. No, according to the scriptures, they're actually falling into place as He has planned it. So in the past 88 years, I have seen things fall into place. I have been asked by a few of you when I would share prophecy or the timeline that I see in the scriptures. So that's what I plan on doing the next four Mondays in a row for you. I just completed a 12-week course at church, one class a week, an hour long. So I'm going to try to condense down into 12 hours into just 4 20-minute segments. So here's approximately what it will look like. The first will be that I will go from the time I can remember when I was young and up until this year, 2021. Included in that will be the 1938 to 1945 Holocaust, which did happen, even though I think some of our history books, as I understand, is leaving it out. It did occur when Hitler tried to wipe out the Jews. So we'll come up to the present time in today's lesson. The next lesson, I will continue to go from 2021 through God's plan in the Bible as it relates to His climatic years. But basically what is happening now in 2021, this year, and what is all around us. The third one, then I would continue to what will happen when God calls his church home, what happens after that point. And fourth, I will go back and we'll try to bring in maybe some articles and some scriptures and things to back up the things that we have been saying. So we want to listen to God's plan. God must first of all do away with evil before he can have the kingdom of his son set up on earth. So we're going to see how that happens. We have a small problem, perhaps a big problem, that is before us that many people do not know about what is coming down the road. And it kind of scratches your head because preachers are supposed to preach the Bible, but only 98% of the churches, well, turn it around, only 2% will preach on Bible prophecy or tell what's coming down the road. 98% do not. Why was that happening, or why is that happening? Well, first of all, it's because that the pastors, they just don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole because sometimes they don't understand the subject, or they're afraid they will scare their congregation, or they are afraid that they will make people feel so uncomfortable. So they resort more to what we would call the social gospel, which is to preach messages which deal with taking care of the sick and the afflicted and the poor around the world and so forth, which is good, which God would have us preach. We need to bring prophecy into it too. One of the big problems is that they have taken in the scriptures and they have taken promises that have been given to Israel and said, well, that's no longer valid. That now belongs to the church. Israel is the church. No, never has been, never will be, doesn't match scriptures. And right now we're finding out with Israel back on the scene, yeah, it's not possible that that can happen. So, what are we looking at now? What clues do we have? We have COVID-19, we have global warming, we have reset government. Is that involved? Yes. Stay tuned. We'll probably cover that the next lesson. So how do I handle life? How do I take life? I do it as Billy Graham said. I take it as if I'm going to live a full life, but prepare as if this would be my final day on earth. For Christ tells us to fear not. You have a great comfort in God. For God can see the very beginning, from the very beginning to the very end. It's like looking over, and he looks down on everything. And Isaiah in 46:10 says he sees the end from the beginning. So he knows what's going on. In some past snippets, I did cover some issues that's going on in the world. Snippet number 9 was the destruction of culture, which plays into last days. Snippet number 6, deception, which is the number one thing God warned us about before the coming of his son. And number 3, I talked about the virus and the cure. And number 1, the storm that has developed all around us during this just past year. So let me follow my notes closely so I can stay close to what I want to say. What is going on? Where are we headed? And what are our choices? So I've learned a few things in life. I've learned to, in these years, how to maybe make better decisions. And I've learned what the Bible tells me about the present and the future. And I have lived to see some of the major events in the Bible play out as it is described, proving that the scriptures are true. So I will stay away from any deep places, and I won't have charts, I won't have things like I had in class, but we will do fine. Believe me, everything I'm going to tell you can be backed up by the Bible. The Bible is not outdated. The chant of 1960, God is dead, is very incorrect. God is very much alive and very much in control. And he has foretold what was going to happen and printed it in the scriptures. The final act is so much in order right now that it could happen this year when he brings man's timeline down to when he takes the Christians home to be with him in heaven and plays out the final 7 years on earth. So it all depends where we're at, spiritually speaking, is what we need to be concerned with. So the Bible declares that the last 7 years is not a utopia, which people say now we can make the world over and reset it. That's something we're going to talk about. No, the last 7 years is going to be hell on earth. No one wants to be here. So God has a plan for you. I know the plan I have is to be in heaven with Grandma, and I want to be there with you when those last 7 years occur. So, what have I seen and what have I heard? In 1938 to 1945 was the 7 years that Satan used Hitler to try to wipe the Jewish people off of the face of the earth. He killed them, he murdered them up to the point of about 6 million. The Bible said that he could not completely do that, and he was hindered from doing that. If you want to read Ezekiel 37, it will talk about the valley of the dry bones, where it speaks about that God would bring back the Jewish people from their graves, and they literally came from the countries where they had fled, which could be called to their graves, their death, especially out of Germany where they were being put to death, and brought them back to make them a nation and become alive again according to that chapter. The amazing thing is he did it in the very exact spot that he started them with in Genesis chapter 15, where he started them within the land of Israel, and that's exactly where they have returned to. And I saw that happen in 1948. The world recognized it in 1948. And then the Bible goes on to say that Jerusalem will once again be the capital of the Jewish nation. I saw that happen in 1967 during the Six-Day War. And then, for the past 45 years, I've seen Psalm 83 played out, where it talks about the nations around Israel and the people like the PLO and Iran, and Hezbollah and Hamas, and different countries trying to squeeze and destroy and get rid of Israel, and some they've even said like a cancer, cut them out and get rid of them. But God said, no, that's not going to happen. Once I put them back in the land, they will stay there. And there are several Old Testament scriptures that speak of that, and that will happen, and that is what's happening. They plan on staying there, and they know that. So the land is in their hands. So advancing forward to 2017, I saw Jerusalem become the official capital. Donald Trump made the statement, and others joined in. Other nations have moved their embassies. That Jerusalem is now the official capital of Jerusalem. If you go to Psalm 102 and verse 16, it will tell you that when Zion becomes in the hand and recognized by the world as the capital of the world, during that period of time, God will send back his Son and set up the nation that he has promised for 1,000 years. This move you have seen happen in your lifetime too. So, in 2020, we have seen Arab nations around the southern part and eastern part of Israel making agreements and peace agreements to live peaceably with Israel. It's called the Abrahamic Accords. They are establishing relationships, recognition, and trade agreements, and even, I think, setting up embassies. And that there would be then what they would call, as we read in Ezekiel 38, you read Ezekiel 38, it said there would be peace, and there would be security within the land. And I have a statement here from a gentleman who lives in, has a website, and he lives in Israel. His name is Amir Safarti, and he lives near what would be the valley of Amagero. And I'm going to quote exactly what he says when we say, well, when they're living in peace and safety. This is his quote. Israel is safe, secure now, never been safer. Not close to being destroyed, has peace with nations and earth is forming, never had it so good, and they are strong. Have a fast-moving economy. The years ago, there was no safety. In old days, we had to have walls for safety, back in Bible times. But these days, the cities are unwalled. The new developments where they're establishing towns are unwalled. No walls in these days of modern Israel. So the days of dwelling safely in the land is also being strengthened by the Abrahamic Accords, these relationships, and there is additional great safety. So if you go to Ezekiel 38 and 39, which we'll get into that war later, these on the north, though, these are the nations on the northern part, which you take would be Russia, which has moved into the northern part. There is Turkey, and then there's Iran. And they're the ones will be coming down against Israel. The ones on the south have made peace, and you can trace it out in the scriptures. So Russia has made its move in the year 2015. We have seen that, and we know that those are being carried out right now. So the Bible tells us that that generation that sees Israel become a state again will also see Jesus come and return and set up his kingdom. So how long is a generation? According to Psalm 90 and verse 10, 70 years, and by strength 80. So do your math. 1948, any Jew that was alive in 1948 and would live 80 years takes us to 2028. The Jew that would be alive in 48 would be alive also in 28, right at the end when Jesus sets up his kingdom. That is declared in Joel 3, verses 1 and 2, where it says that the generation that was alive will see both events happen. Well, that would probably include myself too. Or the generation of Gentiles that are alive also. But what about COVID-19? What about climate control? What about the election? What about the WEF reset? These are playing a big part right now into setting up things. These are things that I am seeing in my lifetime. Do they fit into Bible prophecy? Absolutely. And they will continue to play an important part this year. New Year came around, and we are hoping for a lot of new things and good things in 2021. I don't want to throw water on that, but I would say buckle your seatbelts. 2021 is not going to be as an easy ride as we think. And I'm going to continue that next week in our next comments. So it has been said by a lot of people, and it's true, We are not going back. We're absolutely going forward. And one word going forward is control that I want to talk to you in the next session. Thank you for listening.